I've got this machine hooked up to my main monitor, and I got the power supply switched on, so let's go ahead and check out and see if it works. Sorry guys, I'm not a Linux server guy. Hello everybody, and welcome to Mountain Computers. It's been a while. Before I address that little issue, why don't we get right into today's video. So today I'm going to be showing off a project that I have legitimately been working on since about the last video. It's just been taking a very, very long time, and I have not felt like it's been done several times, even when I've gone to go and film and make a video about it. So I'm hoping that today I will finally get through all of the video and feel like I can actually present what I've put together, because at least for right now it's in a fairly functional state, a place where I feel like I can actually present what has gone on over the course of, you know, the past 10 months. It's been a continuation of a project I've been working on for a while, and no, this gray backdrop here is not a fancy new place for me to film on the channel. It's actually a curtain to help me block out some of the noise from the project. It doesn't work that well, but it helps. So why don't I turn around here? We'll roll the intro and I'll get right into exactly what I've been working on. Okay, so first of all, if the audio sounds kind of bad, I'm afraid you're gonna have to bear with me. I didn't feel like setting up everything today, so I am just on my phone. I've got probably at least a little bit of more professionally shot stuff that I'll show a little bit later in the video, but we'll see how that goes in editing. So yeah, as I said, this shower curtain, well, it's technically just a regular curtain on a shower curtain rod that is in the middle of my office room, is not a backdrop for videos. It is actually hiding something, so why don't I just pull the curtain back here and show you what I've got. It is a computer equipment rack, a telecom rack, if you will. And also, you may recognize this box if you have watched some of my previous videos, the one that's on the floor here. I will get back to that in just a minute here, but in the meantime, why don't we just kind of from a high level take a look at what is in the rack here. I'm not going to remember model numbers for everything, but I'll probably throw them up somewhere on the screen here. So this very poorly lit piece of equipment down here at the bottom with that blue screen is an uninterruptible power supply. I think I might have shown off with the previous build that I did that was in this system. It's dusty. It's been sitting back here for a little while I continue to work on it, because this one isn't ready yet, but the rack it's getting close. Anyway, in the last video I might have shown off that I had an uninterruptible power supply, but it was not this one, and I got a rack mounted one with a higher capacity and a higher you know, instantaneous power delivery rating, so that I could potentially have, you know, a bit of a chance at keeping all of this stuff running for a little bit of time off of it, while I would wait for the computers to detect and turn themselves off, since they this can theoretically have a power reading read from it for when it does not receive wall power anymore. It has a USB, you know, cable that just comes out the back. You can plug it into a computer. I haven't experimented with that at any extent, any extent yet. I need to get around to that. The last device that I had also had that capability, but I think I just was never quite able to figure out how to interface with it. Not sure if this one's going to be as easy or harder, but well, because I don't know what the original one was. But anyway, yeah, you get what I'm trying to say. I will get around to that, hopefully eventually, because it's kind of important to get your system shut down safely, especially given the kind of technologies that I'm running in a couple of these other servers, which we'll get to. So this is just a little PDU, basically a power strip that you mount into your rack, and in this case it is nothing more than that. There are fancier PDUs that you know, come out in industry, but that is not what this is. Next is my network router. And you may be thinking, well, how do you mount a router into a rack, Matt? If you're not very familiar with telecom equipment, you might be asking that at least. Doesn't it need to have Wi-Fi and things? Where are the antennas? This isn't a router in the wireless router sense. There is no wireless access point built into this device. It is purely a wired router. This is Ubiquiti's Edge Router 10X, I think, and so it's got 10 ports across it. It's a gigabit router, and that you might be saying, well, that's not very many ports. How do you get everything up here plugged in, along with everything else that you got in your house? And what are all these cords? And that is where the device that's just above the router comes in. This is a Netgear switch that I picked up used, and I got it on a Goodwill auction for about $150, which is just a killer deal when you consider that Netgear was selling these when they were new for about $700. So it's a decent deal, I would think, in my head at least. So that's a 24-port switch, which is what provides me so much extra port density, the ability to connect more devices onto my my network. So these two, the router and the switch, are connected by an Ethernet cable, and then this just you know, basically acts as extra ports in this case. I could have it configured to do more than that, but it just serves basically the same subnet and the same DHCP range as what all of the ports except for the WAN port on the router do in this case. So not too much special going on here, other than the fact that this is a power over Ethernet switch. So this can deliver, I think the first 8 ports are 802.11.AT and the rest are .AF compatible. So if I'm not mixing up my terms here, I believe that AT is the higher power, slightly newer PoE Plus standard, and AF is the older standard PoE connection. So yeah, I don't think that I am powering my router over this, although it could be powered that way, but I believe that I am powering my wireless access point over this device, and we'll get to that access point later. It is in the rack, just very much at the end. So moving up from here, the next thing I have is just one of these Keystone pass-through panels that you can get, taking a note from Jeff at Craft Computing with this, who I saw using one in a video to do cable management in his rack. Thought that looked nice and cool. His cable management probably came out just a little bit cleaner in the end than mine did. These are all custom cables, and I've kind of been repurposing them over several iterations of this build, so they're not all like perfectly cut to length anymore. I've just kind of done my best to keep them in whichever place they can be used best. So one way or another, it's working and it's good, and it does kind of help out with the cable management, so I'm pretty happy to have this in the rack too. Next up from that is another switch, actually. So you may wonder why, if I have this for port density and this for doing the routing, why I would need another switch when this gives me all the port density that I really need. And that is because this, as some of you may have already noticed, is an SFP Plus switch. It's called a cloud switch, I think. It's from MikroTik. I'll put the model number up on the screen somewhere. It's also right there, I'm sure, but either way. SFP Plus means that this isn't just a gigabit switch. It is a 10 gigabit switch. So having some servers in the rack here, what I've actually done is I've connected 2 of the servers and also my main gaming workstation kind of machine up to this as a storage network to operate at 10 gigabits per second, which is very nice. Being able to transfer files back and forth like big video clips at higher speeds has been very handy already, so that is a real nice benefit, actually, and I am very glad to have gotten it, even though this piece of equipment is, I believe, the most expensive piece of networking gear that I have in this rack at $250. Many of you may be familiar with the fact that 10 gigabit networking doesn't usually come cheap, and $250 is fairly cheap for one of these kinds of things. Normally it would be the case that you would run into some cost restrictions with trying to run 10 gig with this kind of a setup with SFP, I mean, because of the optics that would be involved with having things connected like this. But in this case, there are actually no optics in this system. Nothing is fiber optic. I have direct attached copper cables here instead of fiber ones, and I can get away with doing that because the distances aren't very far. Everything is in the rack except for this connection, which is just a Cat6 connection made with one of these little SFP to Cat6 adapters, 8P8C connections. So this just runs out and over to my gaming PC, which is only right here, so that's not a problem either. I believe I could go 100 meters even with this connection anyways, but I'm not nearly running that far, so no problems there. And latency isn't that much of an issue for me. I just want the throughput, so copper winds up working pretty well for that. Next up from there, why don't I skip to this little box that's up here. Actually, it's going to be real quick to cover, which has these cables that are hanging down and getting in the way of the shot and making it not look very nice. This is just a box for an HTC Vive Cosmos, and it runs out these cables over to my my VR headset now. So I just got this recently. This was the best place to put it. I am sorry that they are in the shot. So next from there is I'm not sure whether I have this server actually in my original video or not, but why don't I go ahead and just kind of roll whatever I had there in that video in right here, and I'll come back to you in just a second. And then we have the star of the show sitting just above here, which is my rack-mounted server. So why don't I go ahead and open this guy up, and I can talk a little bit about what components are installed inside of there. Okay, you will have to forgive the atrocious cable management, but server chassis are not exactly known for their neat and tidy cable management solutions, so this is just how it's going to be. It's not impeding airflow or anything, it just looks messy. This is an old power supply. It's a 500 watt unit that, if you've watched my channel for very long, you've probably seen me use on plenty of occasions. It's looking a little dirty there, but it's running just fine. So then here at the start of the show, we have a very interesting motherboard from ASRock. This is one of their ASRock rack boards. I'm at a miss for what the exact model number is, but I'm sure I can put it on screen for you. This is a board which allows you to put in a regular old AMD Ryzen processor but which also offers some distinctly server grades kind of features. So some people might not be familiar with what I'm talking about there, but the really big one there is IPMI, which is remote management of your system. So there is a network interface on the back of this machine, which is specifically dedicated to offering a web-based platform for managing this server. You can change around settings, you can monitor things like temperature and voltage across the board's sensors, and you can even get a video feed off of the motherboard's built-in video graphics platform over your internet connection, and you can pass mouse and keyboard back virtually to create basically what amounts to an internet protocol based KVM, or keyboard video mouse, as that stands for those who wouldn't be familiar. And so IPMI is what that's called. It's often misquoted as standing for Internet Protocol Management Interface, but it's actually an Intelligent Platform Management Interface. Anyway, it's a very cool feature for the fact that you can turn the server off and on, and you can interact with it with a graphics display all completely over your network connection from one of your regular workstations or desktops. So you don't have to come over to the machine to turn it off and on. You don't have to go over it and plug in a keyboard and a mouse and have a monitor just always sitting there to be able to spin up new virtual machines or do stuff like that. It's all just completely done from your regular old workstation, which is very handy and very cool. The processor that I have in here right now is the 1700, AMD Ryzen 1700, which you've probably seen me use in a video a while ago if you watched my Ryzen update video, and you can find that, if you haven't seen it, in a card which I'll put up here. Yeah. So what else is in here? Looking in on the expansion cards here, this is an LSI RAID controller card. I have several hard drives hooked up to this system, which will be somewhat difficult to show off here, but hopefully this kind of shows them. There are, I think, 6 in total, which amounts to with 6 terabytes each, and put into RAID 6 a usable capacity of, I think, about 24 terabytes. It's a little bit less with formatting and all that stuff, but not an insignificant amount of storage for use for images, for virtual machines, and for storing user data and things like that. Ultimately, it really does the trick pretty well for the use case that I have for this server. And then it also has, in RAID 1, coming straight off the motherboard's chipset, 2 SATA SSDs. They're 500 gigabytes each, so a usable capacity of 500 gigabytes with the RAID mirror. And that is what the machine boots off of course, and some of the virtual machines even boot off of there too, just depending on, how much space they take up and how intensive the application that I'm trying to run on them is. Alright, I guess you're back. So, here we are again in the present. So today, what I'm using it for is as probably what I was using it for back then, just a standard virtualization server. I have updated it to run, instead of CentOS, which I believe would have been what I was running back then, Proxmox. I've replatformed the entire thing off of, a RHEL-based sort of distribution into an Ubuntu-based, just Debian, I guess, based distribution. And the reason for that was just because, the CentOS project has been killed off, so I've kind of decided, well, if I can run the same VMs in Proxmox anyways, that I might as well replatform, even if I have to kind of sort of relearn some of the Linux stuff that I've been learning to work with the Debian-based stuff anyways. That's probably a good thing to learn in and of itself, I guess. So, Yeah, I've been pretty happy with Proxmox. I'm also running a couple containers on this. I have my Plex server, which was probably the main thing that I was using the old server for. On here, at least I have the virtual machine for it running on here. The storage isn't here anymore for it, but we'll get back to that in a second. I'm running a Nextcloud server. A few game servers, like my Minecraft servers, are running on here, and different virtual machines now. The website for Mountain Computers is run off of this. Several different things, a lot of servers that are all just kind of standard server fare for home lab stuff. So yeah, that's basically what this is. It is powered by one of my old Ryzen processors, a Ryzen 1700. I might have been using a 2400G when I filmed the previous video, but I have since traded that with Joseph, and I've got the 1700 again. Joseph is now almost ready. He's on the brink of doing an upgrade, which will happen here in a couple days, to go to 3rd Gen Ryzen, which should be pretty good for him. So he's getting off of the old low-core stuff and getting up to an 8-core processor, which should be awesome. But anyways, so this also has 64 gigabytes of ECC memory. I'm on a motherboard from ASRock Rack that does support ECC memory on the Ryzen platform, which is pretty cool, and also helps out with the 8-drive array that I have in here running ZFS with 4 terabyte disks. That's mostly there to house Nextcloud data. It doesn't need to be nearly that large, but I decided to put a lot of storage behind it just in case I needed it, and also because I am trying to do a little bit of ZFS replication that I don't have fully set up yet, honestly, between this box and the storage box that we'll get to eventually. So, yeah, and let's see, what else? What else is important? Oh, I have a 128 gigabyte SSD in here that's an M.2 SATA SSD that is for LRC2 for that ZFS array, so I have basically a cache that allows me to write data to the array more quickly for, a first equivalent to the disk size amount of data for whatever is free on that disk, as well as retrieve files that are commonly used from it more quickly. So that is cool. And I also have, because I'm running everything off of ZFS in this box, I don't necessarily have the ability to have a swap partition set up on any of those disks, so I also have a dedicated 128 gigabyte swap SSD in here. I don't think there's anything else that's super relevant in here. There's it's not a RAID controller, a host bridge adapter that's in the back of this, and I also have a 10 gig NIC in here, for the 10 gig connectivity, but I believe that that's everything that's really relevant with this box. So why don't we move up to the next one? I know that I was covering the next one in the last video, so I'm going to definitely cover that here. It might not have been in this chassis, but I will let previous Matt talk to you about what he was doing with that box. Today I'm here staring at a server chassis in preparation for some upgrades that I'll be making to the rack mount system that I covered in the last video. This is going to be a second server that I'm going to install into that rack, and I could certainly not have afforded to be able to do this without the very generous help of my friends. So I want to start this video by thanking all of them for their support in helping me put this together. So why don't we start going over parts here. This is a motherboard by Supermicro, and it is the H11 SSL-I. This is the bulk packaging version of that board. I think they sell 3 versions, a regular retail one, an OEM one, and then this one. Here I have 32 gigabytes of registered ECC memory, And here you can see that there is a 500 gigabyte Samsung 750 EVO SSD. So this machine's going to, I think, probably run VMware's ESXi hypervisor. I've already got some of the prep work done on this server, as you could probably tell by the fact that the motherboard is in here. This case I've done some modifications with already. Normally this case would have the power supply and drive mounts on this side, and I've swapped them for a couple reasons, but I won't go into the details too much on it. I want to leave this video as a fairly high-level one, just kind of covering what's going on. If you couldn't tell by this pretty bulky, massive CPU socket, this is going to run a fairly special processor, which you might have seen sitting just over here. And this is an AMD EPYC processor. It is one of the 16-core models. It's a Naples, not a Rome processor, and I don't happen to remember the model number. This is going to be the, heart of the computing platform for this machine. This processor is just massive. Like, here is a standard Intel desktop processor for scale. It's just huge, and I know that one of the reasons for that is that what way back when would have been called a Northbridge, but more recently has been called a PCH, that this chip on its platform would have interacted with, is not present on this board anywhere, because this CPU has got that functionality actually integrated directly into it. So, yeah, pretty cool. What else? Let's see. The big thing for this server is going to be the graphics card, which I will try and bring into frame carefully here. This is an AMD FirePro S7150X2. This is a very fancy graphics card, no doubt that I got second-hand decommissioned from some data center. This is a very special card. This uses a standard for PCI Express communications called Single Root Input-Output Virtualization, or SRIOV, and that allows the GPUs on here to be sort of virtually subdivided to accomplish delivering graphics processing power to several users concurrently. And ultimately, you can probably see where this server is going, just knowing that information if you're familiar with this stuff, but this server will be intended to act as sort of like a VDI, or a virtual desktop infrastructure server, and the intent here is to enable some of my friends who are not as fortunate to be able to afford their own computing devices, namely gaming desktops, to be able to hopefully play some games remotely over equipment stored here on my network that they all sort of paid for together. So it kind of becomes a group effort to provide a lot to hopefully people over different times. So yeah, it should be a pretty cool project. I'm hoping that everything kind of just falls into place with ESXi compatibility and that graphics card, because they are supposed to be compatible, but sometimes things just don't work out. That said, I'm hoping especially to have a little bit better support on this platform, because it's a server platform. It's been verified for compatibility with several different products, and I'm hoping that this particular configuration is one that has been a little bit more widely tested. We will see about that. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, what has changed the most has definitely been with this machine in this rack, as far as what I had at least previously covered on here. So this server's intention is still the same. I'm still setting it up to act as a sort of virtualization host that has virtual machines with graphics passed through that my friends can log into and play games off of. And I've been successful in being able to do that despite some network latency problems, which have resulted in it being only mildly useful and only helpful in certain circumstances. But that said, I have still actually managed to get the machine to be functional. And so when I say that the machine has changed quite a bit from the way that it was originally intended to operate, one thing that might clue you into what I've had to do is the fact that the card that I was going to use is sitting here in my hand right now and not in the machine. So this AMD FirePro S7150X2 is basically dead as far as I can tell, or at least it's not functioning correctly. So another thank you goes out to Mr. Jeff from Craft Computing. I actually put together a machine that was basically exactly like the one that he was going to use these cards in before he did. I was very surprised to find when I watched one of his videos that he had put together basically the same system. That is, we're both using almost exactly the same motherboards. I'm using a first-gen EPYC 16-core CPU. I don't remember which CPU he's using, but it's pretty similar. It's on the EPYC platform, obviously, in order to be similar at all. And he was using 3 of these S71 X2 cards from AMD, and the way that he validated these working was to use a less than legitimate key for the high-end business, what is it called, Enterprise Plus version of VMware's ESXi. And so I, after fumbling around with trying to get this thing working with the open source driver for a couple months for KVM, was getting to the point where I could manage to pass virtual functions of the GPU through to the virtual machines. However, once I would try and load the driver, the entire machine would crash and then do nothing. So following what Jeff had done in his video, having now seen it, I instead wound up trying to load ESXi and see if I could get that to work, because it looked fundamentally much easier, not needing to recompile the Linux kernel and recompile the KVM driver to update it for, you know, several of the incompatibilities that it had suffered in its lack of maintenance over the couple years since it had come out. And ultimately what I found was that the card will still not function within that environment. So this card is dead as far as I can tell. I didn't do anything differently than what Jeff did in his videos, so I still could not get virtual functions of this to pass through. I could still see them in ESXi, and once I would try and load a machine with this, it would still crash. So I am almost certain that this card is dead. Which really sucks, because that was $400 down the drain. So what instead I have done is I have taken some eclectic parts that I've had around, and I've used the fact that this board happens to have several PCI Express slots on it already, and I've just gotten some individual graphics cards from a few places, one of them being my cousin's old build that we did a couple of years ago on the channel for a budget Ryzen build. I sent her a GTX 1060 that I had and didn't need, and after hemming and hawing over whether she wanted to put it in for a while, she finally did, and so I got the GTX 1050 that she had back. That is in here now. I also on the last Black Friday, I got a RX 570, and I put that in here before this insane GPU shortage that we've got now. I mean, the GPU shortage was still there, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. It was still pretty bad, but that's a whole nother topic. Wow. Anyways, so, and then I also had a much older card. I think it's an ATI Radeon V... No, it's not a V series. It's an HD 3870, I think. It's a pretty old card, but it kind of does the job for one of my friends who just wants to be able to play old games that don't have LAN support with me. He can log into that, and we can play literally on the same LAN if he's remoted into that machine. So, yeah, it works pretty well in that circumstance. I also have a 4-port Ethernet card in the back of here now. That gives me dedicated hardware Ethernet for every virtual machine that runs on here except for one, which is pretty cool. The one is one that I use to log back in here and do network maintenance on if I am not on my local network here. So that's pretty handy, and I don't necessarily need hardware-based internet or networking for it because it's not as nearly as latency sensitive as something like gaming. So yeah, all of the other machines are what gets that. I also have dedicated SSDs put into this machine now. I know that I didn't in the previous clips that I was doing, but yeah, there are dedicated SSDs now for each virtual machine. Not dedicated controllers that I can pass through, unfortunately, so there's still some controller virtualization overhead, but you know, it's not too bad. It's pretty good. I would like to re-benchmark this. I've made a couple upgrades since the last time anyone tried to log into it, so it's been a while since anyone's even bothered to use this machine, which is a little bit upsetting, but oh well, what are you gonna do? My friends did help me pay for this anyways, so it's not as big of a deal. This specific box they helped me pay for, so that was very nice of them. Moving along, the next machine that we're going to take a look at is this one. So this is a network attached storage device, basically. It's not mounted up very well. I got some generic rails to put it on, and the rails were a little funky. They don't actually line up with the rack units, but it works. It's nice having these hot swap bays in the front. I wish that that those hot swap bay chassis were not so expensive, so that I could convert these to use them as well. Even though this one doesn't have nearly as much storage, it would still be nice to be able to swap drives in the system a lot easier than the way that you have to do it in these, because you have to pull them all the way out of the rack, and it's a real mess. So this chassis is great, but was also much more expensive than these ones, and these chassis are already fairly nice in the realm of consumer gear. Anyways, they are at the high end of what a case would cost, and this one would be out of the range of what a consumer case would usually cost. Enterprise gear is expensive. It's unfortunate. But that's part of what has taken me so long to work on this project, is just the sheer amount of cost that goes into being able to, you know, afford all of this stuff. So anyways, this is a network-attached storage device that runs on basically the same platform as this machine. It has a Ryzen 1600 that I was gifted, sort of. Not gifted, but given at a reasonable price by one of my friends who was my roommate in college, Julio. Any of you who have watched for a few years might remember that name. We've had him on the channel a couple times. So his old CPU is in here, as he's upgraded to an 8-core processor as well. Pretty nice. And so I managed to put this together. I did not talk about operating systems for this machine and this machine yet, so let me go back over, because this is running Proxmox. This is running CentOS still, because it took me a long time to put together the Navi kernel fix. I mean, it didn't take me that long to put together the actual fix itself, but it took me a long time to lead up to the point where I could do that. And this machine does have one Navi GPU in it, which I might take out of there and just run NVIDIA ones so that I don't have to worry about that problem anymore. That'd be pretty nice. I might do that. Alright, I'm coming up with that idea right here, right now. So, anyways, Right now this is running CentOS 8, which is going to lose support at the end of the year, so is support really that important for a machine like this that runs on my network here? I don't know, maybe not, but I still would like to be on a relatively current platform, so I might look at replatforming this sometime here soon. Not super excited about doing that after how long it took me to put this together, because this was many months, but yeah. Anyway, this one took not nearly as long. This is running TrueNAS Scale, a newer, like in alpha version of TrueNAS that runs on Debian Linux, I think. It might be an Ubuntu kernel, but I'm pretty sure it's just Debian. And it basically runs the old version of FreeNAS that was on FreeBSD, but on Linux instead, which is handy because I know Linux and I don't really know FreeBSD. There aren't too many differences, but there are some, so yeah, it's a pretty cool project, and I have been enjoying having a box that can do storage stuff separately and offer its storage that is installed down to this box that does the virtualization stuff separately. So this has quite a bit of storage built into it, but it's not too much less than this, but this does have some more. It's got 8 6-terabyte drives. The 6-terabyte drives that I did have down here are now up here, as I have gotten some 4-terabyte drives to put down here, and this also has an SSD to boot off of. I don't remember what the SSD that's in here is. I don't remember what the boot SSDs are in here, and I don't remember them for this machine either, but yeah. Anyways, this machine also has one of those SSD caches. It also has an SSD swap disk. It also has ECC RAM. I think it might only be 32 gigabytes in this one's case instead of 64, but since it's not running any VMs, it doesn't really need the extra memory. ZFS, which is the disk management system that I'm using on both of these to manage those big disk arrays, is really good at eating RAM, so that's why this still has 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I'm acting like it's not very much. It's just because ZFS takes a lot of memory, but yeah, I guess in most circumstances that would be quite a bit of memory, but in this case it's not really, so yeah. And in a server's case, I guess it isn't really that much either. ZFS, by the way, is the reason why I was saying that it will be important for me someday, here soon, to get this uninterruptible power supply set up correctly, because if the power cuts, drive read and writes are not cached on any kind of hardware that is non-volatile on these two systems, so that could cause some problems with data corruption if there is some data in flight between, different places, which wouldn't be good. So being able to have this be automatically detected when I lose mains power and switch over to just shutting these systems down would be, pretty handy. But yeah, that's basically the only purpose that this box is serving, is as storage, which is fine. Yeah, I do need the extra storage, so that's good. And we'll move on to the last box up here. So this, which I will stand up for, is my fourth and final server that's going to remain on site here. This is basically a test box. It's not doing anything right now. It's booting off of 3 SSDs that are in like a RAID 5 in software or something. It's not meant to be extremely reliable, and it's not meant to run anything long term either. It's just for testing. And it is running a longtime resident of this channel, the Dell T1500 motherboard. In this case, I have reinstalled a different processor, which I picked up off of eBay. It's a Xeon processor. I'll put up whatever the model number is on screen. I don't remember offhand. I think it's got like 12 gigabytes of DDR3 memory in it right now. And as I said, it's not really doing anything. Some of you might be wondering, Well, if you've got server-grade hardware in these boxes, you said you have ASRock rack boards and a super micro board in here. How are you managing this? Because you're likely managing it over the network, right? And the answer is yes, I am managing it over the network. And keen-eyed of you might have seen this Raspberry Pi sitting back here. I owe yet another gratitude to Jeff from Craft Computing for this, showing off a project where you can convert a Raspberry Pi into a network management system. So this has a web interface running on it. It's got a HDMI signal that runs back to this VGA card that I have put onto the system. It's really nothing special. It is absolutely just straight up VGA output there, which is being converted by an active converter there with some USB power. And it also has a USB cable that plugs back into the Pi, and that gives you the ability to, over the web interface, send keystroke and mouse information over the USB and receive display information back over the display cable through the Pi. It becomes network management. It's a pretty cool project. I think it's called Tiny Pilot. So it was pretty cool for me to be able to add something like that to a system like this, which I could put together relatively cheaply, considering that I already had most of the parts sitting around. And I don't remember how much it was to put this little project together, maybe like $100 tops. I already had the Pi around, and the other parts were not that expensive. Maybe it was $40 or $60. Yeah, it wasn't significant compared to the price of putting together one of these things. So, yeah, neither here nor there. It's been not very handy thus far to be able to use for testing, but I haven't really had anything I've needed to test so far, so meh. Anyways, up here are the final things that I need to show off, I guess, in the rack. There's a Ubiquiti wireless access point there that's power over Ethernet that runs clear down to the bottom here. There is a Zigbee hub thing that's for Philips smart bulbs, which I happen to have in my house. And there is my fiber optic modem, which runs from the city's fiber optic network. And yeah, that's basically the entire rack of equipment. And the last thing, which I guess I'll cover, is circling back around to the beginning of the project and what I will be doing with this box. So at some point during this project, I picked up some 6 terabyte hard drives that were not the enterprise kind that I'm using in here, but just some Seagate ones that are like NAS drives, I think. I've put those into here, and I have swapped the 2400G I think I mentioned earlier. It went to Joseph that was in here. This now has an Athlon 3000G and like 16 gigabytes of memory in it, maybe 32 now, I don't remember. It'll need to be 32 by the end of this project for what I'm doing with this. But I need to add a little bit more storage to it, and what I'm going to do is, instead of having Windows on here the way that I had been doing, I was going to use your backup to, I believe that's the name of the project, to set this up as an off-site backup that will sit at Joseph's house and have me backup data from all of this stuff in case there's a fire here or something. Replication between these two machines should handle, disk failures on site here, but if there's something catastrophic happens and I still need the data around, then I'd like to have another box off-site that I can have around just for data security. So that's what the intent of this is, but I need to get some more disks, like I said, and I will be working on getting that set up here shortly, and that's going to be the future of this project. So I'll be running TrueNAS on this again probably as well, and that's pretty much what I've been spending, honestly, the majority of my time over the past nearly 1 year working on. It's taken a lot of time to set up all the configurations and get everything running the way that I want it to, and try and implement the best security that I can with the kind of knowledge that I have about those sorts of things. So my apologies for having been absent for so long, especially during the COVID crisis when most YouTubers were taking off with their projects, having a lot more free time to stay home and do things, my work actually kind of wanted me to spend a little bit more time there, just because of the kind of work that I do, I guess. And so I haven't had a lot of time to work on projects in my free time. I have worked on them, but it's, you know, with such a big project, look at how many computers there are here all to set up, and that is over several iterations of doing and redoing all of this stuff in order to figure out what's going to work the best for me. That is what I've been doing. So from here on, now that this project is nearing a functional state, I won't call it completion because you're always working on something like this, right? But now that it's all sort of coming together, hopefully I can get back to making videos a little bit more regularly. And so I have a couple machines already lined up with some updates and things that I could cover on the channel. We'll see what I feel like doing, but in the meantime, I'm going to get back to working on this stuff. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.